At a friend's party, my affair partner grabbed me like we were dating. My husband saw. Hi people, what's up? It's been a while since I've posted in this sub. I know. It's just that I haven't had any good advice for anyone in a while. Anyways, I'm back, but I'm not giving advice this time. I need some myself. You've seen the title, and I know it sounds bad, but just hear me out, okay? For context, my name is Alice, 40, female, and I have been married to my husband, Tony, 41, male, for a couple of years now. Okay, that's a lie. I've been married to him for 10 years now. That's not a couple. Even before we got married, we were together for 5 years. I met Tony in the most random way possible. You see, I'm not a sweet treat kind of person. When I crave something, it's usually something savory, some pasta or some fried chicken, maybe a grilled cheese or some onion rings. I rarely ever want some ice cream or milkshakes or whatever. But one thing I was an absolute fiend for was a chocolate almond croissant. My roommate brought one back in the day, and I had one bite. Instantly hooked. I got one on my way to work. I got one when I was getting off work. I got one while I waited for the subway. I was obsessed. But the best one I ever got in the city was from my little neighborhood bakery that only opens on weekends. There were a few downsides because they only open on the weekends. All the pastries always sell out by noon, and half the city treats it like a secret mission. You literally have to show up 30 minutes early and fight your way just to get some. The chocolate almond croissants were also fan favorites. On the day I met Tony, my roommate and I literally got there as they opened, and there was already a huge line. Now you can imagine how cranky I was already, because I had dragged myself out of bed early for croissants, and there was a line. I got even more cranky when my roommate abandoned me and went home. I got even crankier when I finally got to the front of the line, and the woman in front of me kept changing her mind every 30 seconds. I have no idea how many times I rolled my eyes or huffed, but this lady was not taking a hint. Even the guy at the register was annoyed. So annoyed that he even lost the half-dead look in his eyes that all service workers seem to have. I muttered something under my breath about how this was why I should just learn to bake, and the guy behind me laughed. That was Tony. But because I was a little antisocial, then I just smiled at him a little, then turned back to the front of the line. The lady in front of us finally made up her mind and bought like 15 blueberry muffins. When we finally got to the counter, they only had 2 chocolate almond croissants left. I was very disappointed because I wanted 2. Tony was disappointed too, and he very loudly told the guy at the counter that he wanted 2. The guy just shrugged. That dead look was back in his eyes again. I turned back to Tony and told him to go ahead and get the last one. I figured that I could just get something else even though I really didn't want to. Tony looked offended that I would even suggest that. We compromised instead. He suggested that we split the cost and share the only chocolate almond croissant left. I didn't know him, so I thought he was just being polite, but no, he was serious. He meant it. I couldn't say no to that. I mean, half a sweet treat is better than none, I guess. We got the treats and we walked outside together. I remember he even held the door open for me. I remember going home and telling my roommates about the bakery running out of croissants, but I left out the part where I had met some guy who offered me half a croissant. That's because I did not expect to see Tony again. Do you know how many times I've had a random connection with strangers in this city before and then never seen them again? Never even thought of them again. A lot. It's happened a lot. Big city, little me. But yet, 2 days later I was taking out recycling and he was across the street arguing with a man. They were arguing about whose turn it was to deal with the overflowing community bins. That is when I realized he lived directly opposite me, like directly opposite my building. He looked over, recognized me, and waved. I waved back because what else do you do when fate keeps planting someone in your path? After that, we kept running into each other, usually at the same neighborhood bakery, sometimes while taking out trash, once while I was trying to stop my grocery bags from ripping open on the sidewalk. It was nothing out of the ordinary, but the couple of times I was with my roommates, they mentioned how cute he was, and of course, I had eyes. I could tell that Tony was cute. He had sweeping dark curls, beautiful brown eyes, tan skin. I didn't really have a type, but if I did, he would have fit it back then. Anyways, Tony and I were just casual friends. In fact, I think friends is a big word. We were just neighbors who made conversation sometimes. But everything changed one summer day. I woke up to go to work like I always did. I was the last to leave the apartment, so my roommates weren't with me. I was all alone walking to the train station. He was outside smoking with his friend. I wave and he tells me from across the street to wait up. I was late, but still, I waited. He came up to me and he asked if I wanted to check out a pop-up art fair happening in the park. Honestly, I just said yes so he could go away and I could get to work. It was hours later, when I was at work, that I started thinking about it. I wasn't a big art person, but any opportunity to find community, I took it. So I decided to go. I went straight after work. The park was packed full. It was like the entire 20-something population decided to come out that night. It was super busy. I remember just squeezing through a throng of people. I kept looking around because I honestly had no idea where Tony was. I was about ready to circle once and go home when I heard someone call my name, and it was him, jogging over. He introduced me to his friend, the same guy he had been smoking with that morning. The friend peeled off almost immediately to look at vintage movie posters, so it ended up just being the two of us. We walked from booth to booth and talked about the art. Full disclaimer, I had no idea what the heck I was looking at, but Tony seemed to know a lot about it, and for some reason, I wanted to impress him. The sun started going down a bit, and he suggested grabbing something from the food trucks. Normally, I would have said no, because I try to save money on weekdays, but I had already thrown my routine out the window by coming in the first place, so I said yes. We sat on the edge of a fountain in the middle of the park. At first, it was a little awkward, because halfway through my meal, I realized that I was sharing said meal with a guy that was basically a stranger. I got hyper aware of everything I was doing and saying that I became super self-conscious. Tony noticed and asked what was wrong. When I told him, he just smiled at me. Then he suggested icebreakers. We exchanged questions and stories back and forth until we finished our food. I noticed that at some point I had stopped checking the time on my phone. When I checked the time, my mouth dropped. I wanted this art thing to be a quick 30-minute walk around. Somehow, I had ended up there for almost 3 hours. I told Tony that I had to leave, and he offered to walk me back since it was getting dark. It was a short walk, and we mostly chatted about nothing. We get to the door of my building, and he kisses me goodnight on the cheek. I had my eyes closed and everything. I was super sweet. When I opened my eyes, his face was right next to mine. I thought he was going to kiss me. I wanted him to kiss me. But instead, he took a step back and said he was glad I came. A stupid, sappy smile spread across my face. I got into my house and my roommates teased me about how red I was. I just rolled my eyes at them. They didn't understand. Tony was a charmer and I was charmed. After that, it did not feel like we were just neighbors anymore. The dynamic shifted. We started running into each other a little more often, but this time it wasn't by accident. Like sometimes I would be heading out and notice him just waiting at the front of his building, like he was hoping I'd come out. Or he would come home from the bakery and ask me to buzz him up so he could give me an extra chocolate almond croissant. He was very sweet. Really, really sweet. He knew how to say the right things without coming off as a sap or like he was trying too hard. My roommates noticed. They all teased me endlessly about him every opportunity they got. They called him whipped and asked what I did to make him madly in love with me. I tried to tell myself it was just his personality, that he wasn't in love with me, but I also noticed that he did not talk to other neighbors the way he talked to me. This went on for a couple months, until the inevitable happened. He asked me out. It was summer. I remember because it was so freaking hot that my clothes were sticking to my back. I had taken a half day at work because the office air conditioning had broken and everyone was basically melting at their desks. The subway was no better. It felt like I was actually getting cooked alive in there. Luckily, it was only 3 stops for me. Any more and I think I might actually have fainted. I got home and relaxed for a little bit. Then I stepped outside my building with the intention of getting an iced tea and walking around aimlessly just to cool down and have some fun. Tony was already out there, leaning against the railing in front of his building. He had sunglasses on and a tank top and these short shorts showing off his thighs. He looked downright delicious with all that sweat dripping off him. Okay, let me stop. You get the point. I took 1 step outside my building and he called my name like he had been waiting for me, which he admits now he absolutely was. He offered me the bag. Inside was a chocolate almond croissant. He told me he grabbed one for me because he could tell by the weather that I deserved a treat. The logic made no sense, but it made me laugh. I mean, who looks at a heat wave and thinks she needs a pastry? Apparently Tony did. We stood there talking for a few minutes about nothing important. I invited him to get an iced tea with me because it really was sweltering that day, and I was too old to run through the sprinklers like the kids. Tony said yes, and we walked about 2 blocks to a food truck that sold cold drinks. We got our iced teas and walked around the neighborhood just talking. I was halfway through complaining about the broken AC at work when he cut in and said he wanted to take me on a real date. I froze. I wanted to say yes so badly it was embarrassing. I froze because I was not used to directness. Most guys I had met before him were either painfully shy or painfully unaware. I remember asking him if he was sure. Such a ridiculous question. He laughed and said he had been sure since the day we met at the bakery. So I said yes. Of course I said yes. He suggested we keep it simple. He wanted to see a movie at the old theater downtown that played retro films at discounted prices. My only condition for seeing a movie older than my parents is that we got ice cream after. He agreed. Guess the heat was getting to him too. Anyways, I was so nervous for the date. I was going for casual, but I still spent an entire day trying to figure out what to wear. I wanted to be like Tony and look effortlessly cool, like I wasn't trying hard either. I'm not that kind of girl. I've never been effortlessly anything in my entire life. My roommates had to calm me down and give me suggestions. The night of the date, he met me in the lobby of my building. He wore a button-down and did something with his curls that made them look really handsome. Like I said, effortlessly cool, effortlessly handsome, effortlessly charming. He told me I looked nice, and for once I did not feel awkward hearing it. I think the movie was Breakfast at Tiffany's, or maybe it was Charade. I genuinely do not remember. I only know Audrey Hepburn was in it. The only thing I could concentrate on was Tony. The light from the cinema screen lit up his side profile so beautifully, I wanted to kiss his jaw. But considering it was our first date, I didn't. At one point, I realized our shoulders were touching, and neither of us moved away. If anything, he pressed his shoulder further into mine. After the movie, we walked to an ice cream shop that stayed open late. I got 2 scoops, strawberry and cookies and cream. He got 3 scoops of pistachio because he was an old man at heart. We sat on the curb outside the shop because it was somehow hotter in there than outside. He kept inching closer to me without making it obvious. Or maybe he made it obvious on purpose. Tony was never subtle when he liked someone, which was nice. I liked the directness. We spent so many months just dancing around our feelings. I didn't want that anymore. When he walked me home that night, he kissed me. Not on the cheek this time. A real kiss on the lips. After that, we were inseparable. He would text me good morning and good night every single day. We went to every street fair and outdoor movie the city had to offer. He met my roommates. I met his friends. We spent entire afternoons just hanging out with each other. I wanted to know everything about him. He wanted to know everything about me. Honeymoon periods are real, people. We were so in love, so untouchable. And somewhere in all that, dating turned into a relationship. He asked me to be his girlfriend about a month into it. I said yes. That is how Tony and I started. We dated for 5 years before getting married, but it never felt that long. Time flew. I moved into his apartment about a year after we started dating, mostly because I was already spending every weekend there anyway. My roommates called me a traitor, but they helped me pack my boxes and then immediately claimed my old room for storage, so I think they got over it pretty fast. Living with Tony was easy. I thought it was going to be some huge adjustment, the usual arguments over sharing a space with someone so intimately. But nope. Tony was clean, organized, and surprisingly domestic. He cooked more than I did and was very proud of this fact. He was very homely. When we'd have guests over, he'd be the one to plan most things. He had his issues too. He had a temper and he got moody and jealous easily. He thought things had to be done a certain way, and if they weren't, it threw him off. He didn't deal with change easily. I could go on, but I won't. Because honestly, the bad outweighed the good. I saw his flaws, but I chose to focus on the man I could see that was kind and loving. Life flew by, and before I knew it, I had spent years with Tony. I know 3 years is kind of a long time, but honestly, it still took me by surprise. Tony was everything I needed and more. He still had his issues, but he was working on them. He had gotten rid of that temper and moodiness. I was in love with him. So when he proposed on our 3-year anniversary, I said yes. We spent 2 years planning our wedding. Honestly, we probably would have planned it for longer if our parents didn't pressure us like crazy. They all had the idea that it was okay to live together for a long time as boyfriend and girlfriend, and it was also okay to live together for a long time as husband and wife, but to live together as fiancés for longer than a year was embarrassing. So we hurried the wedding planning along, but it still took us 2 years. The wedding came and went. I know a lot of people romanticize their wedding day and say it was the best day of their lives, but to us, it was just another day. We literally got back to the hotel and just collapsed on the bed, thankful that the long day was over. The first few years of marriage were as golden as everyone promised marriage would never be. We had a home that actually felt like a home. We never really argued about anything serious. We had small disagreements, sure, but nothing bad. I know what some of my other married friends had argued about, and few. Ours were tiny in comparison. Our marriage was steady, which sounds amazing when you say it like that, but sometimes familiarity can turn into autopilot. But back then, before any of that, we were happy. We built a whole life together without even meaning to. And for a long time, I thought that Tony was it for me. I thought that Tony was the person I would grow old with. But that is where Lucas comes in. Lucas is Tony's friend. He was the guy that was smoking on the day that Tony invited me to the art pop-up. Tony and Lucas have been friends since they were kids. They grew up together and bonded because they were the only kids in their preppy private school that came from a working-class background. After high school, they moved in with each other and stayed best friends. Lucas was kind of a package deal with Tony. I understood that when we got together. I didn't love the fact, but I also knew that he had a bond I would never understand. They hung out like 4 times a week. Sometimes, in the early days of our relationship, Lucas even slept over. I'd wake up to make coffee, and he'd be passed out on our couch. I got the feeling that in the early days, Lucas didn't like me much. He never took the effort to get to know me. He huffed when Tony and I spent time together. He complained when we moved in together. I thought I could just ignore him, but that was basically impossible. I tried to tell myself that maybe Lucas was just protective. Some friends get weird when a new person enters the picture. It's just that he was always in our space. If Tony and I made plans, Lucas would magically appear and tag along like it was a group activity. He had this habit of sending Tony a text 5 minutes before we were supposed to leave for a date, and before you know it, we'd all be hanging out. I would be sitting there in my nice outfit, ready for a night with my boyfriend, and suddenly it was a trio outing. If Tony and I were watching a movie, Lucas would drop by to borrow something and then somehow end up staying for the whole thing. If Tony and I were cooking dinner, Lucas would knock on the door and ask what we were having. If Tony and I tried to have a quiet night in, Lucas would show up with a video game and take over the TV. It was like he had a sixth sense for when I wanted alone time. Lucas was like our unofficial third roommate. I wish I was joking. I tried to make an effort anyway. I told myself that Lucas mattered to Tony, so therefore he had to matter at least a little to me. I asked Lucas questions about his work in graphic design. He always responded like I was wasting his time. I tried to bond with him over the art galleries because I knew he loved that kind of stuff. He gave me one-word responses. I even bought him a birthday present, a limited Lego set I found online. I thought he would love it. He said thanks, and then joked that he hoped I kept the receipt. I wanted to take the sketchbook back and throw it in the trash. Eventually, I had enough. This was about 2 years into being married. Lucas had been weird with me for as long as I'd been with Tony, which was about 7 years then. It was exhausting, so we had a conversation about it. The truth floored me. Lucas wasn't jealous of me. He was jealous of Tony. He liked me. He had liked me since the moment we got introduced to each other, but since I was with Tony, he pulled away. He had assumed we'd never last, so he was prepared to wait out the crush. Apparently that didn't happen. He kept pushing his feelings to the side. Looking back, I should have nipped that whole thing in the bud, but I didn't. You guys want to know why? It's because I liked him too. Yes, I was happily married to his best friends, but I also had eyes and natural human urges. Lucas was cute. Anybody will tell you that. He was taller than my husband. He made more money too. He worked out more. I could see his muscles through the shirts he wore. So yeah, maybe it wasn't a full-blown crush then, but I admit that I liked him. That discussion was supposed to make things less awkward for us, but it actually made it more awkward, just in a different way. Now, there was this thing between us. We didn't know where we stood with each other, especially considering the fact that I was married to his friend. But we knew there was something between us, something we both wanted to explore. Things changed after that conversation. Lucas actually started looking at me when he said hello. His comments were no longer sarcastic. He started asking me about my day. He helped me carry groceries upstairs a couple of times. He even apologized. Not directly to me, of course. That would have been too straightforward for Lucas. But he pulled Tony aside one night when he thought I could not hear, and said that he had been rough on me in the beginning because he thought Tony was rushing into things. He said he was wrong about me. Of course, that was a lie, but Tony didn't need to know that. Things moved slowly until they didn't. The day that I started my affair with Lucas was like any other day. Work had dragged on for forever. The train was delayed twice. I came home to an empty apartment and realized too late that Tony had taken off on a work trip. He'd left that morning and wouldn't be back until Friday. Normally, when he traveled, I just used the alone time to decompress. But that evening, the apartment felt very depressing. It was too quiet and too hot, and the thought of sitting there all night doing nothing made me sad. Lucas texted the group chat earlier saying he was home working on some new commission. So I knew he was home. I grabbed a drink from the fridge, walked out, and walked a few blocks to his place. He opened the door looking surprised, and I could barely hold back a moan. He looked so good. He had on boxer shorts and a band tee. His hair was sticking out in different directions. He looked so handsome and sexy. I almost kissed him right there, but he moved out of the way to let me in before I could. His apartment was cooler than mine. I remember that he had 2 fans going and one of those portable AC units. It was dim and quiet, and his entire living room was covered in art supplies and canvases. We talked about nothing for a while. I sat on the end of his couch. He sat in his desk chair, so far away from me. At some point, he offered me something to eat, so I followed him into the kitchen. He ducks to look into his fridge, and when he gets back up, his body is pressed against mine. That was the moment everything shifted. I kissed him. We made love right there in his living room. It was amazing. I loved every second of it. I thought I would feel some regret, but I didn't. I thought that I would think of Tony the entire time, but I didn't even remember him until I got home the next day. Yes, I spent the night. Wouldn't you if you finally got the opportunity to love someone you've been pining after for months? In fact, I spent the entire 4 days Tony was away with him. It was fun. All we did was hook up and play house. When some of our other friends would come over, I'd hide in his bedroom while Lucas tried to get them to leave. No one suspected anything, and nothing reached Tony. I got back to our apartment just a couple hours before Tony came back. That's how the affair started. It went on for years. We had mastered it. Tony had no idea. He still loved me, and he still adored Lucas. He had no idea we were sleeping together, sometimes in his own bed. Thank God Lucas never really wanted commitment in the first place, so he never pressured me to leave Tony and marry him or whatever. I also know he was sleeping around with other people, couldn't care less. He could do whatever he liked. I wasn't having an affair with Lucas because I wanted him exclusively. I wanted him because he was exciting and he was fun to look at. Everything was going great. Tony and I were still together and happy until about 3 weeks ago. A party, a stupid effing party. It was a casual thing hosted by one of our old friends. I didn't even want to go because it was a Saturday night and I had a new episode of my fave TV show to watch. But Tony loves these kinds of gatherings. He likes catching up with our friends. He likes the music. He likes the energy. And honestly, we hadn't been out much together in a while. I figured it wouldn't kill me to put on something nice and just suck it up for a few hours. Lucas was invited too, obviously, because Tony never goes anywhere without inviting him, or at least telling him about it. And Lucas showed up early enough to help set up. He was wearing a plain shirt and jeans, but he still looked stupidly attractive. I could tell he'd gotten a haircut recently. The years had been kind to him. Some people really reach peak attractiveness in their middle age. One of those people is Lucas. I wasn't planning on doing anything with Lucas that night, despite how handsome he looked. I genuinely just wanted to survive the evening, have a few drinks, laugh with some friends, go home and watch my show. That changed when the party started. Every time I looked up, Lucas was already looking at me. It was a very charged look. He was undressing me with his eyes, right in front of everybody. I loved it. After a while, he drifted over. The moment he got close to me, I felt the temperature in the room rise. He acted normal at first because we were surrounded by people, including Tony. But then we ended up alone. Tony had disappeared to the bathroom, I think, and everybody else had just naturally floated away. It was just Lucas and I in a corner of the apartment. "You should come home with me tonight. Ditch Tony." I told him that was a stupid idea, but my body was betraying me. He gave me this look. Before he could suggest it again, someone called his name from across the room, so he stepped back. The night kept going and everyone got increasingly drunk, including me. Tony's sober, so he doesn't drink at all. When I get drunk, I get careless, so I didn't want Tony watching me too closely. I didn't want Lucas coming near me again, but both things kept happening. It was Tony that worried me. He kept looking at Lucas and I together. I could feel his eyes whenever we'd whisper to each other. A couple of times I caught the look on his face. He was observing. By around 11 p.m., the party had spilled out onto the balcony. Half the guests were smoking or trying to get fresh air. I went out there because I needed the breeze and, honestly, because I needed space away from both of them. Lucas followed. He waited maybe 10 minutes. Like I said, we were professionals at this affair thing now. 10 minutes was enough time to make it look unintentional, but I could tell he did it deliberately. He looked around and saw that no one was paying any attention to us. Then he smiled at me. Next thing I know, Lucas reached out, wrapped his hand around my wrist, and tugged me just closer to him. He wrapped both arms around my waist, too. I just melted into his arms before I remembered where we were. I yanked his hands away immediately, but it was too late. Tony had stepped onto the balcony just in time to see it. He froze in the doorway. His eyes were fixed on Lucas's hand. Lucas straightened up, looking super awkward. I stepped back from Lucas. Tony turned around and walked back into the party. Lucas and I looked at each other. We both had no idea what to do. I thought that Tony would leave the party or something. I was just about to tell Lucas to drive me home so I could beat him there and talk to him when I heard microphone feedback. Next thing, Tony's voice sounds out over the speakers. "Hey everybody, want to know what I just figured out?" Lucas and I ran back in. Tony was in the middle of the living room, standing on the couch. He had the mic in his hands. He looked manic. His eyes were red and wild. He looked like he'd been drinking, but I knew he hadn't. So this was not alcohol. It was pure rage. He locked eyes with me the minute I entered the room. His face got even redder if possible. He started talking again, eyes on me. "My wife, you guys know my wife, right?" The crowd murmured among themselves. It wasn't like Tony to do something like this. I knew what was coming. I knew what was about to happen, and I was powerless. It was like my body wouldn't move. "Well, I just figured out that she's cheating on me." Everyone gasps. The music stops. I can feel everyone's eyes on me. Tears had started leaking out of my eyes. I was so embarrassed. Lucas pushes past me and goes up to Tony to try and get him to stop. Tony just hops off the couch and grabs Lucas by the collar. "She's cheating on me with my best friend." Tony pushes him away roughly. He falls on the coffee table. Everyone is gasping now, whispering among themselves. These are my friends, and they look at me as if they do not recognize me. Lucas is still on the ground, touching his back. Tony continues with his rant. "I was so stupid. Of course you guys are having an affair. I see it so clearly now. I mean, neither of you have denied it." I opened my mouth to deny it, but only a sob came out. "You two deserve each other." "Oh yeah, and your stuff would be outside when you get home." Then he walked out of the party. He must have flown down the stairs because 3 seconds later, I recognized the sound of our car starting up. Great. Now I had to take the train to get home. Lucas got up on his own and no one helped him. In fact, they all looked at us either disappointed or angry. I didn't even care for Lucas anymore. I just wanted to get home to my Tony. So I ran out of the party, too. The train took 20 minutes. With the car, Tony would have gotten home in 15. When I got home, my stuff was outside our door. I banged as loudly as I could, but he wouldn't let me in. I know the neighbors were listening, but I didn't care. I must have begged outside the door for 2 hours straight. Tony had blocked my phone, so my calls didn't go through. Eventually, I took my stuff and went to Lucas's. He came home 5 minutes later and let me in. That's where I've been ever since. 3 days ago, I got an email from Tony's lawyer. He wants a divorce. That's why I'm on here. Nothing goes through if I don't sign, so I'm stalling as I try to get advice. Is there anything I can do to make this better? Update, 1 year later. Sorry, it took so long to update this one, guys. Reddit suspended my account and then I forgot my password. It was a whole thing, but I'm back now to give an update. Tony and I are divorced. After I realized all hope was lost, I signed the papers. I figured I would be all right, that Lucas and I would try to make it work. We didn't. We weren't relationship people. We argued all the time. He tried to be faithful to me, but he kept sleeping around. I kept comparing him to Tony. He didn't like that. One day, 2 months into living together, I woke up to find him gone. His bags packed, all his stuff gone. He had gone off to Europe without telling me, essentially leaving me homeless. It was his name in the lease, and it had run out. I had to move out literally 2 weeks later. My old friends do not like me anymore. They don't invite me to things. They don't call. They don't tell me important information. They all chose Tony in the divorce, literally. I'm pretty lonely now. You try making friends at 40. I've had to move in with my brother and his partner. I'm sleeping in their living room. I hate it. I have to save up a little bit to get a place of my own. But for now, I'm stuck here. Tony seems to be living it up. I see him around. I hear through the grapevine. I miss my husband. I miss his smell. I miss his laugh. I miss his hair. I miss everything about him. I know I threw that away for nothing, and I know it's my fault, but I still miss him. When I saw him last, I asked him if there was ever a chance he could forgive me and take me back. He just laughed in my face before walking away. So that was my answer. That's it. That's the update. I hope you guys feel like this was a good ending, because I don't.